congratulations. You just came upon the first year of...
1 year anniversary of our sellout performances of Catholic Young Adults, the musical. So real excited. We're put a video up online this last week so people would enjoy it. We were hoping to do it again, but that didn't happen. So
Yeah, people always say, not always, but often people say, you write plays.
yeah, I do. I write plays.
Did you study that?
I did, yeah.
And did you study acting?
Uh-huh.
And you're a singer?
Uh-huh, yeah.
You've even written music.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, why is your preaching so boring?
Ooh. Ouch.
Well, not even just your preaching, but I think whenever I've seen you celebrate Mass, it's actually pretty disengaging and boring.
Yeah, so I guess that would be the topic for today, the liturgy.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
I'm Father Kowalczyk. I'm here with
Father Andrew Brinkman.
We had at least one person say they liked our videos, so we thought we'd do another one.
Just for you.
And the topic is the liturgy, and maybe the liturgy and emotion.
Right.
Liturgy and sentimentality.
So you would know just as well as us that when a kid or a family member says, I don't like going to Mass, the primary reason...
I stopped going to Mass years ago.
The primary reason is?
It was boring.
And, on the flip side, when people like going to Mass, it's often because...
Or they left the church and started going to a different denomination, or they talk about the Lutheran church down the street, or Eagle Brook, or whatever. It's always because...
It's more engaging.
It's engaging. And they'll point to any number of things. I'd say several of the big ones are the music, the preaching.
And frankly, which is connected to the preaching, it's the personality of the priest. There's
Sure.
a lot of weight on the priest's shoulders. I can say this because I am a priest, I got to make sure that people are getting something out of this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the this problem there is we know that there's certain things. Your kid wakes up in the morning and says, I don't want to go to school. Why not? Because it's boring. You're not going to say, okay, well, you don't have to go to school then. Or I don't want to, hon, why aren't you going to work today? Nah, my job bores me, so I'm done.
Yeah, that's called getting fired.
Yeah, right. So there are things we have to do even if they're boring. Wait, are we actually making an argument that the Mass is supposed to be boring?
I would say so. Yes.
Okay, so let's go into that because I think people are going to be troubled by this.
Yeah. I think because we're living in a time where everything is catered to our entertainment, to our enjoyment, even some of us who love the Mass, who love the faith, want to see it be fruitful. We've experienced the beauty of the Mass, its richness, and even ourselves we want to say, well, we need to make the Mass more engaging. And the Mass ought to be boring.
This is part of this is this modern phenomenon that our attention span is about that of a hummingbird or something.
Most people have already stopped watching the
I know. We can watch later. We'll see how. Oh man, okay.
Crash.
That one person is still watching. Thank you. But especially if some people will cite the Mass in the 40s and 50s. People are old enough and say it's like, I had no idea what was going on. People were praying the rosaries, they're falling asleep, et cetera, because it was boring. And what does that betray right there? Because I've been to you know, you can say, like, I don't, you've ever been to the orchestra?
Yeah.
I find it to be boring. What does that say about me?
Well, you're probably uncultured.
I'm an uncultured Philistine. I have no appreciation for beautiful music. You know, how is it that another person can go and be like riveted, can be on the edge of their seat, can be moved to tears, and another person can be like, this is boring. Well, I would say because they actually don't get it. Mm-hmm. The more somebody understands about music, the more, I'm a musician of sorts. I play the guitar a little bit, but I mean, a trained violinist could go to the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra and just be like, wow, that violinist was amazing. And they'll see things and nuances that I had no idea because they're trained, they're watching for that, they're listening for that.
Right, so it sounds like what you're saying is that to be able to appreciate the Mass, not as though I'm a spectator, but really to appreciate it in the same way that we would appreciate a good walk through the woods, a good piece of flan, which we just had a couple of.
Yeah,
it was really good.
3.
Flan's really good. Yeah. A good piece of music, it actually assumes that I know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I live so Delano, where my parish is a baseball town. We have one of the best local baseball parks in the state, and it's really beautiful. A lot of baseball people. Up until a few years ago, I found baseball to be the most boring sport in the universe. It wasn't until I lived with a fella who is now a priest in the archdiocese here, who was a big baseball fan, and sometimes just for the sake of, you know, camaraderie, I would sit on the couch and kind of watch him watch baseball. This is your classmate, Father Brian Park, and so I started asking him, like, so wait, why is this, you know, what's going on? I'm like, I kind of knew, like, okay, you get 3 strikes, 4 balls, you hit it, you try to hit it as hard as you can, run as fast and far as you can, and get home run, and it seemed like nobody was ever doing that. How boring can this game be? Well, he started explaining to me, you know, the strategy behind it and how the pitcher is trying to outsmart the batter, who's not swinging for the rafters every time. Sometimes he's trying to just get a ground ball past the third baseman. Sometimes he's trying to just pop it right over the second baseman's head. He explained to me the suicide squeeze. You know what the suicide squeeze is?
No.
So I think there's a man on first, a man on third, there's 1 out or less, and your goal as the batter is just to get the third baseman home. So the call is that the guy on third base is going to run no matter what, and you're going to bunt. And so your only goal is to get your bat on that ball so it doesn't A, hit him in the head, or B, miss completely and the catcher gets it and tags him out. I've never seen it yet, but that's the one I'm waiting for. But I found baseball to be it actually became very riveting because I knew what was going on. So when somebody says, I'm bored at Mass, what does that betray?
That the person actually doesn't know what's going on at the Mass.
They have no idea what's going on at the Mass. So when we you know, like, well, people back in the old days, they'd just be praying the rosary or staring off at this. Well, what does that say?
That they didn't know what was going on at the Mass.
They didn't know what was going on in the Mass. Actually, here's the clincher, is that most priests don't know what's going on in the Mass. It actually wasn't until the early 1900s that there was even a major institute of higher education to teach and train priests on the liturgy. Prior to that, the 1800s, 1700s, it was all rubrics. You do this, you say this, you stand here, you go here, you wear this. That's great, but it's not engaging the priest. He isn't able to really pray if all these, like, I have to do this and say this. The old adage is, here we got the Roman missal right here. Some of it's in black, some of it's in red. Say the black, do the red. That was kind of the adage. No, but I want to pray the Mass. So if the priest didn't even know how to pray the Mass, how are the lay people going to pray the Mass? How is he going to draw them into the Mass? And so one of the things that the liturgical movement sought to do was teach the priests first of all, and then teach the people how to pray in the Mass. Teach them, actually, one of the movements was to teach them Gregorian chant so that they could sing along and participate in the Mass. Teach them the responses in Latin so they could say the responses too. So those sorts of things to allow them to engage themselves. All right? We don't change the Mass, we change ourselves. That affects our engagement. Mm-hmm. Every student has had this too, like history is so boring, until they realize the significance of history and find something like, oh, I don't know, Alexander Hamilton, and then all of a sudden history is amazing, right? Yeah, history didn't change.
No, but my relationship to history changed. And this is so good, especially the teaching of participation in the Mass. But we can also see that this which it was a good thing. The liturgical movement at the beginning of the 20th century was a very good thing, insofar as it sought to engage on a deeper level the participants of the Mass. That is, that they would understand what the suicide squeeze really was. But there's two things we gotta, I think, distinguish. Number one, does participation in the Mass mean that we're just being active?
No.
Yeah, which is the point, that I can be engaged in something without doing a whole lot of gestures, without doing a lot of singing, without doing a lot of speaking, but there can be an internal engagement. The mother who watches her baby rest, she's actively engaged. Now, she's not doing a bunch of stuff, but her heart and her mind, her attention is focused, and she can hear what's going on outside, and she knows exactly where her baby is, and she's engaged, but she's not doing a lot. And this is I think something that we need to clarify, and that is the engagement that we bring to the Mass is not, first of all, the multiplication of stuff, but it's actually an interior disposition, which, frankly, it's a harder engagement to reach.
Yeah. We often point to the statement in the Second Vatican documents, which was full and active participation. Now that left out of context can be a little bit deceiving, and it can kind of lead to this activism, which I was just listening to something Scott Hahn said the other day, and he said activism is the worst problem in the church today. We're doing, and we're not praying. It's the worst problem in the church today. I think that's been the worst problem in the church at all times. We want to do stuff, but I think probably for modern Americans all the more so. But it's not this active, like, okay, so you do this reading and you take up the collection and some of those things are necessary, but I point out sometimes to my servers, which I don't have any right now, but like, you actually have to do this and pray at the same time. It's a really hard job. If you're an usher, your job isn't to take up the collection and seat people and make sure things are running well. Your job is actually, you got to be praying while you're doing those things. That's hard. That's really hard, because what's sometimes left out is full, active, and conscious participation. So let's take this conscious into the mind. How is my mind being active right now? It's not about my body doing stuff, which I think that's important too, kneeling and standing and sitting, but it's about my mind engaging in the mystery. I'm doing the engaging. Sometimes there's this distinction made in the Latin word for activity. There's two words, actuosa and activa. Is that right?
I wish I could tell you. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt.
And activa is, kind of physical outward activity. Actuosa is the actualization of the thing happening. So something can happen and it can have no bearing on my life until I activate it in my life by consciously bringing it into my mind.
Yeah, and it's so good to talk about this active participation and understanding what it is that I'm doing while I'm at the Mass. I think that another way that we can look at this is the Mass not only needs me to understand what's going on, and as you just said, to choose it, to want to be engaged in this, but in many ways, one of the difficulties of the Mass is that I think by and large we assume that people have a relationship with Jesus in the first place. So for example, you could give to your one of your students, if you're a teacher, the rule book of the NFL, and you could say, this is football, and then now, like, you know, the kid can learn it, but I mean, he might read the book, he might read the rule book of the NFL, all of the different, you know, stipulations and what an onside kick is, but it's different from introducing him to the game of football, allowing him to watch a great running back like Barry Sanders, falling in love with the game, and then being interested in the rules. And what I see is that we just assume that everybody actually loves Jesus and wants to walk with Jesus. And I think that that's actually even more profound in terms of what leads somebody to engagement. Well, yeah, I have to know what it is I'm doing, but I also have to be a friend of Christ, a disciple. I want to be in the Mass in the first place, not to fulfill merely an obligation, although it is that, but I'm in the Mass because I actually want to walk with Christ, and I want to go where Christ is going. And I think that this participation is certainly very difficult too.
Yeah, I think that actually leads into a really important point, that the Mass is otherworldly, right? We're kind of stepping out of this world into this sacred space, a sacred time, and it's different. And in a beautiful church, like you go to the St. Paul Cathedral and you walk in, you're like, whoa, I'm in something completely different. It's like a different universe, a different planet. And everything while I'm in there should point towards that different world. Well, what did the Lord say about him and the world?
Well, I mean, he said a couple things, but he's not of the world.
He's not of the world, and the world is going to hate him. You know, and in each one of us, in me, in Father Brinkman, in all of you, there's something of the world. And it's that piece of me, that worldly piece of me, that rebels against that sacred time and space of the Mass. And that's what boredom is. Boredom is actually the sinful, worldly part of me slowly dying. And that's why I take a holy hour every single day. And I try not to fill up my holy hour with reading too much stuff or saying set prayers, or I pray my rosary at a different time, not during my holy hour, because kind of one of the points of my holy hour is that I get bored. Because when I get bored, I know that the sinful part of me, the worldly part of me, is dying, and I want it to die. I want that part of me to die.
The truth is that you're spending time with God, the creator of the universe. And by faith, we know that that is all sufficient, but our lived experience is not totally there yet, and that's boredom.
Yeah.
It's the suffering of being with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, the suffering of being in the Mass, the same thing, day after day, week after week, year after year, is, on one hand, we know that we're in heaven.
Yeah.
Like, this is the gate of heaven. And yet, there's something in us that would actually rather be doing something else. And that's crazy. I mean, like, why would we want to be doing anything else but being in heaven?
Yeah. So yeah, like there's right. We got the worldly part of us, and we got the part of us that's been redeemed by Christ, and says, "No, I want to be here. I want to do this. I want to be able to. I want to be engaged. I want to enter in." And it's that battle. That's our lifelong journey. That's our journey of discipleship. You know, and you mentioned something that's interesting too. Like, I mean, how many days in a row have you been going to daily mass or celebrating daily mass?
Thousands.
Yeah, I mean, I've missed like 2 days of saying mass because I was sick. Before I was for 15 years I've been going to mass almost daily with a few exceptions. It's almost exactly the same every single day.
Right.
Like the readings are a little bit different, and the homily is a little bit different, which is, I mean, that's, for a daily mass, we're talking like 7 minutes out of the half hour that you're there is different. Everything else is exactly the same. How many of you could sit and watch an episode of, pick whatever your favorite show is, every single day for 15 years? Or I know there's some people out there who've been going to daily mass for 30, 40, 50, like, do that. Start watching the same. Oh, The Office is the best. Like, watch one episode of The Office every single day for the next 15 years.
Yeah, it just does not sound as appealing.
No, but somehow we can go to the mass every single day because we're not doing something, we're not watching something, we're coming in contact with God.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we started off talking about the boredom of the Mass, and don't get us wrong, we're not proposing that we should be unprepared in our preaching, sloppy in our gestures. We shouldn't be singing bad music. We shouldn't be singing off pitch. All of good candles and all of that. Like, that's important. The object is not to make the Mass boring, but the object is not to make the Mass engaging for engagement's sake. No, the Lord meets us in every one of our senses, on the colors and the smells and the music, and that's good. Like, the whole man prays, the whole man, body and soul. But I think some of us, we just got to come to terms with the fact that actually the Mass is boring, and that's actually really good for us, because once we hit boredom, there's a choice to be made. Am I going to go seek something else? Am I going to go watch another program? If I'm learning an instrument and I get to boredom, am I just going to drop the instrument and do something which is more engaging? Am I learning a language and I get bored with it? Do I just drop it? Or do we penetrate through the boredom in pursuit of the end, which in the Mass is communion? And like, it's okay to be bored at the Mass.
Yeah, well, and then we find when we start to experience Mass, and one of the things I think Mass is meant to be, and why it's monotonous, why it's the same every single time, is so we don't actually have to do anything. That we can just go and know what happens. There's no surprises. There's no, we're doing this today. Oh, he told us to stand up and I didn't want to stand up. It's like, no, we know. And then I can just enter in and relax. I can just be. I can be present with the Lord, and there's something very soothing about this. A couple of years ago, I took our 8th graders from my last parish on a pilgrimage to DC. And it was a pilgrimage, it was not a field trip. We had Mass every single day, and I would tell them, we've gone and seen all sorts of exciting and amazing things. And by the way, 8th graders can manage to be bored in like these most epic museums in the country. But we've seen all these amazing things, and it's overwhelming, and we come to Mass, and even though we're in a different part of the country, it's the same. And we can just relax into that. And I can think of, we would go to the beach when I was a kid. My dad's parents he grew up in New Jersey, so we got to New Jersey every couple of years. My dad's favorite thing to do is just lie on a blanket in the sun for like hours. Like, this is so boring, but for him, relaxing, refreshing. And once we can go to the Mass and walk away refreshed, then we're starting to enter into the Mass. Because otherwise we have this, the opposite of that is this sentimentality that we want to keep bringing all these things from the world into this divine space.
Polka masses.
Polka masses. Every wedding, there's always a request for secular music, some country song or whatever. We say, you know what? You can do whatever you want at your reception. This is the Mass. Funerals are big because we're already emotional, and so there's all this sentimentality. This is no joke. There's a funeral director over in the West Metro who, this woman, now, the daughter was not a practicing person, but she wanted Aretha Franklin, I think, first of all, and then second of all, and more problematic, she wanted a bubble machine, sending off bubbles as Mom's casket was being wheeled in. And he had to say, well, I don't think the priest is going to allow that. And then he couldn't deter her, so she had to go to the priest, and the priest certainly did not allow that. And why? Not because he's a big meanie head, but because this is a sacred place, and we're doing something different here. We have all sorts of other time. I mean, this even kind of brings into like a eulogy or something like that. It tends to like, is that good? Is that wrong to remember our beloved? No, but does it fit right here? Are we fitting it in with the mysteries that the Lord is drawing us into? Or are we bringing the world into it? We're actually remembering in a funeral mass what Jesus did for the deceased,
right? Not
what the deceased did. And too often it turns into like these funny stories.
She was a great cook.
She's a great cook. He's riding his Harley up in God's Harley band and playing his drums. You're like, what? It's kind of like, I thought one time, a best man speech at a wedding reception and a eulogy are not much different. But we would never put that in a best man speech into the wedding. Why? Well, because it just doesn't fit there.
He's often grilling. He's often revealing some embarrassing stories.
Yeah, but oftentimes it's a eulogy too. It's like, okay, this is about what the Lord has done. We're leaving the sinful man, and every person that I've ever buried was a sinner. We're actually asking the Lord's mercy on those things, not bringing those things up.
Right. Right. It's a good segue. I mean, just seeing how our attempts to spice up the Mass or to make it more palatable, or really, if we don't know what's going on, if we don't have catechesis, and we're not in a relationship with Jesus, it's true the Mass is going to be boring, especially if you go to the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe or St. Maximilian out in Delano. And that would be our way to encourage you as a final word, which is really to understand what's going on in the Mass. The Catechism has really some very beautiful reflections on the liturgy, and you could pick up Joseph Ratzinger's The Spirit of the Liturgy. But there are really many resources to help us understand what is going on. And as you said so well, once I do understand what's going on, not to say that it's just a walk in the park, but it does change the way that I'm receiving.
Yeah, it takes some work. I think one last thing I want to say is, I heard this from a priest years ago, and it just stuck with me. You know, we can say, I want the Mass to be more like Eagle Brook, which is one of these big mega churches with multiple campuses. It has literally a rock band and a concert during the middle of their service. I've literally heard people say that. Why isn't the music more like that? Well, because as Catholics, we have to go to the Mass. And I have to go to the Mass whether I just got engaged and I'm super excited, or whether I just miscarried a child or lost a parent. And I'm sad. And both of those people need to be able to go to the Mass and to enter in and to bring their hearts to the Lord and not be kind of thrown around. Like, if the song is demanding clapping, well, guess what? The couple that just miscarried, they don't want to clap right now. and that can be a real turnoff for them. And sometimes the ambiance of music, if it becomes sentimental, it only appeals to a certain type of person or certain population of the congregation.
Right, and I mean what you talk about in emotional states is true for cultures. You've got the how do we say it? The different personalities of traditional nationalities, and well, actually, that doesn't matter. The Mass is given to us so that it doesn't matter what nationality you come from. Doesn't matter. Like, we can all enter into the same thing. The music, Gregorian chant in particular, it's not my thing. I mean, we didn't grow up with this.
No, we grew up in a parish with guitars. And we didn't even have Mass in a church. We had Mass in an auditorium and high school gymnasiums.
But the real beauty is that no matter where I am emotionally or where I'm from in the world, I can walk into the Catholic Mass and just float along the stream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even if it's in a different language, you have Spanish here, or I've traveled to all sorts of countries, and the Mass is the Mass, and I can enter in. So we'd put it back to you. If you find yourself bored, good. Let that part of you die. But also start learning more about the Mass. And I know you and we both try to catechize and teach on the Mass because I find it to be the best thing on this earth.
And what we'll be doing for eternity.
Yeah. Later.